There we go.
Hello! Today, World Socionics Society interviews Ashley Dodson. Hello, Ashley, how are you?
Hello. Hello.
Good. You ready for the first
Clearly, I'm
question?
thirsty.
Oh, you're thirsty. I'm thirsty too. It's why I got my glass of water. Right. Question 1. How did you get into typology?
Jeez. It's kind of a weird answer that doesn't have any kind of definitive. I mean, if you're aware of like Hippocrates' temperaments, sanguine, choleric, all that, I was at my grandmother's house or grandparents' house several years ago, and they just happened to have a book on it, and we took tests, and that was my interest, the start of my interest. From there, I eventually got into Myers-Briggs, looked into the personality of astrology. I found that pretty fun. Let's see, various aura color personality theories, and of course, eventually, I heard about Socionics on an MBTI forum, and I was like, hey, why not?
I see. So, would you say that Socionics is the most interesting personality typology that you come across so far?
I wouldn't say that. I usually find typology interesting, no matter what it is. I think there are definitely advantages to it, kind of like for any personality system.
Hmm. Okay, and what interests you in psychology in general?
I have no idea. It just, I like being able to put people in boxes. I find it fun.
I find it fun too. Although some people don't like being put into boxes, and
I know.
they respond to it in a rather negative manner, and then I feel sad because then I'm not allowed to put them in the box and tell them about it. So I have to like do it silently, which can
My
be fun.
my stepfather is like that. He's also very religious, and he's like, how can you put man in a box when God isn't put in a box? And I'm like, shut up.
Oh no! Oh, is he one of the sorts who relates everything to God in some way, shape, or
Yes.
form? I'm wondering if possibly there could be some sort of counter argument to that. Like you could push your own point, but all you have to do is relate it to God in some way, and He might listen to it.
No, that, no. That requires the patience to actually formulate everything I say in that kind of method, I guess.
Hmm.
Not really worth it for me.
Yeah, I could see that being quite tiring. Right. Do you work or go to college?
I'm not in college right now. I am working. I'm taking a semester off of college.
Ah, what are you doing for college?
I changed my major over the summer. I am now what is known as multidisciplinary studies. Basically, I have about 4 more hours total, and
Mm.
I'll walk out with a bachelor's in this degree plus a minor in psychology, a minor in English, and my third focus is music.
Hmm. And with your job, what do you do?
I am a cashier at a cafe.
Hmm. How do you behave when you're a cashier? What is your way of interacting with people at work?
I generally try to be really upbeat and pleasant. I try to give as much information as possible when someone needs help.
Hmm.
Um, I can go a little too fast sometimes. I kind of realize at times that I need to slow down and stop talking quite so quickly.
Hmm. Do you find that do you find that your usual person actually is proactively creating the conversation?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're there for them to order food. I don't necessarily have active conversations with most of them. If it's someone I know relatively well, we might talk a little bit. It just kind of depends. I actually had one conversation. It was the funniest thing with this guy who he noticed that he knows my name, and I don't remember if he asked me if I was in college or what, but we ended up getting on to the subject of Gone with the Wind
Hmm.
because, you know, one of the characters in that is Ashley Wilkes. I think it's Wilkes. Anyway, so we ended up talking about how Gone with the Wind was this example of the Southern mindset that it's not that they were malicious necessarily, but their way of thinking was just like completely backwards. They saw black people as childish, and you know that they really, really needed white person's help and supervision and what have you. So then we ended up getting into how that was kind of the Southern view in light of losing and how they had to justify that to themselves when what they saw as their God-backed cause just completely fell apart.
Hmm.
And he ended up going, getting his food, getting settled, and then he came back and gave me book recommendations.
Hmm.
And it was just the funniest thing. I don't think I've ever had a conversation like that since.
Sounds a very interesting conversation. And did you appreciate the idea of being given book recommendations?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I have unfortunately lost the list, but
Oh.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was kind of funny because, like, he was trying to go out of his way not to offend. Because,
Hmm.
like, one of the books is called The Klansman,
Hmm.
and he was afraid that I would be extremely turned off by this, and it was just so funny.
Why might why might you been turned off by that?
The Ku Klux Klan is not popular in most of American society because they were known for being very brutal and extremely racist.
I see. So it's more of a touchy point.
Yeah.
I see. How are you with touchy points? Are you someone you can usually shrug them off pretty easily?
My own touchy points or other people's touchy points?
Oh, just touchy points in general. We can talk about both sorts of touchy points.
Mm, I, as you have probably noticed, I'm the kind of person who tends to take most things too seriously. I have a tendency to get irritated over a lot of things, and I'm not always very good at moderating that response. I was talking to Jesse Parent, about it not too long ago, I think, and kind of talking about how it reminds me a little bit of the kind of E-base, E1 behavior of people just going ah when they're angry.
Hmm.
But for me, it's less huge blow up expressions. It's just, this is wrong and it pisses me off.
Hmm.
And I have a tendency, like I said, to do that way too much and just kind of indiscriminately throw my emotional energy at whatever seems out of place in that sense.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I can be touchier than I'd like, but I think also things like growing up with someone who invalidated my opinions all the time has made me very, very touchy about being contradicted. And that's not something that I always had to deal with, and I really hate that I become that way. Because I think it would be nice to be able to discuss something without getting defensive every time someone doesn't agree with me.
Hmm. So you'd like to almost have a conversation where you can actually be listened to and you won't just be shut down to start off with.
That, but to give an example, one of my good friends in high school and I used to just talk about religion, and we had different views, and we expressed those different views, and at the end of the day, we were okay.
Hmm.
I would like to be able to have more conversations like that where I'm not getting defensive just because someone doesn't agree.
Hmm. Makes sense. So in other words, you like the idea that there's no single correctness
I wouldn't say that. It has less to do with seeing something multiple ways and more just being able to discuss the views without fixing too much emotion to it, I guess. Emotional reactiveness.
Yeah. So just discussing it in a more sober manner, in a more
Yes, precisely. Um, As far as other people and their touchy points, I wouldn't say I'm always good at identifying other people's touchy points, but I can go out of my way to avoid them. At other times, I choose to engage them specifically. It really just depends on what I want out of the situation and whether I think that their touchy point is valid or not. I value sensitivity to a degree, but I also think there's a point at which people are too sensitive and they need to get the hell over it.
So you're very good at you almost have a sense of where is the right level of sensitivity and where it's just too much. Where it's just
I wouldn't say my awareness is that fine-tuned. I'm still kind of trying to work out. I spent a long time basically trying to be agreeable to everybody, and that's another one of those upbringing things, too much dealing with irrational and explosive people. But I'm still trying to find the balance in between saying what needs to be said and, you know, being careful how I communicate it. Which is to say, yeah, I'm not... It sounds like you are asking me if I am particularly precise at determining when is too much and when isn't, and I would say no.
Okay. It's more. What I meant is more like you have your set opinions on where there's a line of appropriateness and where for people's sensitivity and when people are just being too sensitive.
Yes and no. I know that's not very helpful, but I mean, like certain situations, I'm probably going to be more likely to say, yes, sensitivity is appropriate here, sensitivity is not appropriate there. And sometimes it's also less about, I want to be sensitive because I care about these people's feelings, and more, I'm choosing to phrase myself in a more diplomatic manner because I really don't want to deal with messy reactions.
Okay. So in which case you have a good sense of when it's the right situation to be more sensitive and where it's not such a good situation to be sensitive.
Probably not. I seem to piss people off enough.
Or maybe it's because you actually... I know if it's in my case, I often am afraid to piss people off entirely, and I don't even do it when it's appropriate. And in other cases, and then I do it accidentally anyway. Whereas I get a sense that for you, you kind of you know where you do piss people off at points maybe on the forum, but you feel as if they were asking for it in that sense in situations.
Sometimes. I think what I generally try to do is, yes, I can get kind of snarky, but I generally feel that there is a level that I try not to go above. Like, when I get angry, it's usually berating someone, being kind of cold or hostile, but I don't get into this messy, explosive, screaming at people. I try to avoid that. I feel that what I do is typically what I would consider to be an acceptable level of aggression.
I see. So, first of all, you know what the acceptable level of aggression is, so you know not to go too far over it, and also it's not so much about just... Yeah, go on.
To me, the acceptable level of aggression is not entirely situational, because, I mean, one place that says you have to treat others this way versus, for example, I would feel a lot more comfortable laying into someone on the 16 types than I would on Personality Cafe, because the rules of conduct are completely different and the consequences of doing what I want to do are completely different. So yes, sometimes it is situational, but at the same time I have my own internal standard of what I don't typically want to go above. And if people find that offensive, I'm not as sympathetic because I think I'm still within acceptable standards.
So you kind of define your own standards for what is acceptable in these areas.
I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah.
For me, it's like I'm more like almost a slave to these standards, It's like there are these standards about, and either I can fail at them or I can try my best to follow them.
And then fail at them.
And fail them nevertheless. Okay. Well, we went off on quite a tangent there, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Right. Okay. Where were we?
You asked me about school and work.
Oh yes. Do you enjoy school and do you enjoy work?
School's alright. I mean, it is what it is. I have had some classes that I really enjoy. And other classes just like, well, I'm here, you know, like I took a creative writing class and it wasn't my favorite. I learned some things. And granted, it did teach me some useful things because I was required to get out of my comfort zone and just do things that I would not have otherwise done, because in academia, what is allowed as a writer is extremely restrictive. They have this kind of bias against anything that they consider to be genre fiction. So basically, if you write romance, action, fantasy, sci-fi, you're screwed, and you just have to stick to what they consider literary and acceptable.
Yeah, I had that. Yeah, I had that problem when I was doing English literature A level. I got frustrated as to what was the canon and what wasn't. So I'm alright with a sort of scientific canon because there's like a set of clear standards on what is accepted and what isn't. When it goes into the arts, I kind of find it becomes more subjective, and therefore I get more frustrated about it being rules and subjective matters.
It is extremely subjective, yeah. My view on those particular rules about genre is basically that you have a group of old men sitting in a stuffy room somewhere who decide what is and isn't acceptable, and it's kind of absurd.
Exactly. It's just these people who have been okay. So they've earned their degrees in a certain area. They've studied for a certain number of years, but somehow that gives them the ability to dictate other people's attitudes towards different pieces of literature and pieces of art.
I guess I don't see it so much as dictating others' attitudes, because, you know, they cannot influence my attitude toward it.
Oh, true.
I just think that they put down rules that are incredibly stupid and that are, I guess, what's the word, not propagated. That might be the right word. Just kind of that is spread around and
propagating.
Spoken from other teachers because this is how we do it, and I don't necessarily agree with how we do it, per se. I did have one teacher, though, that I really appreciated because we did read genre fiction in his class. I'm trying to remember what we were talking about best-selling books and what made them bestseller and how the people who wrote these books understood the culture of their time and were able to tap into it in a way that made their writing very popular with people. And because of that, we did read some genre fiction, and I appreciated that he didn't turn up his nose at it just because it wasn't literary canon.
Okay. Is there anything that you'd like to be doing instead?
Instead of
school, instead of your work?
I always said I wanted to be a writer, and I do think that would be fun. It's something I've never strongly pursued because, I don't know, most writers don't make that much money. And I've always been more interested in earning a living and having a roof over my head than in being a starving artist. I think also something that bugs me about writing, and something that's kind of going to the wayside with self-publishing and the internet and what have you, is the idea that I have to take these things that I've written and change them around to fit somebody's view of what the public will find acceptable, and I'm not writing for the public, I'm writing for myself. That is probably a very poor business stance as a writer, but that's still how I feel about it.
But I think that's the divide between art and business.
Mm-hmm.
Art only the art that becomes business is are those that are lucky enough to be supported by the public who actually pay
Mm-hmm.
to see that art. Without that, the luck of that support, the art is it never becomes business. I suppose that's why it's like the idea of maybe having writing as a hobby on the side while someone does their job, and then
Mm-hmm.
one day when it clicks with the public, can then turn into a career. Okay. How do you behave at home or when you're on your own?
Very lazy, very messy. Usually can't be arsed to do anything that I don't want to do. Probably way too much time on the computer. I don't know, when I'm at home, I prefer to be doing things that interest me. And the things that are not particularly interesting but need to be done generally fall by the wayside until I absolutely have to do them. I'm also not the most social person in the sense that, I mean, obviously I'm very social online. I'm constantly talking to people. But when it comes to the world around me outside of, cyberspace, I haven't really connected with that many people. And also not having a car makes it more difficult to actually go out and interact with people more.
Not having a what?
A car. I don't drive.
Oh, a car. Okay. Yes. Is there what is public transport like where you live?
There's a bus, and it's not particularly expensive, but you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and it doesn't run on weekends.
Oh wow.
So
That is
yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
mildly limiting.
It does sound very limiting. So I'm lucky. I'm in London, where we got one of the best public transport systems in the world. It's great. Up maybe Japan. I think Japan beats us because they're always on time. But we definitely got one of the oldest systems, at least, I guess. I see. So in other words, you're someone who you have this sense of you do have this need for stability. Just fly. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry. Not you go away. The fly go away.
I know.
You do have a sense of you need this sort of life stability, which is why you don't want to be the starving artist. But there's also this sense that we were right in saying that you have a lack of ability to actually motivate yourself to be productive.
Basically, I have this. My mindset is more. I want to be able to do what I please when I please, but I want a generally stable backdrop to operate against, if that makes sense.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I want to be able to do what I please when I please, but I want a stable backdrop against which to live my life.
I see. So now, I see. You need that like stable, almost this the spine of stability, and then you can actually do what you want to do.
Pretty much. And also, I've mentioned this somewhere, but I think productivity is kind of relative. I mean, on the one hand, I'm not being productive in the sense that there are a lot of chores I don't get done. On the other hand, I may be writing, which I do all the time, and in getting something done, I'm being productive, just not in a way that is necessarily commonly accepted as productive.
Oh, so no, I'd say writing is definitely productive. I mean, if the more you write, then the more there's likely that something will click with the public, and therefore it's more likely that you'll then be able to actually publish something that you've written.
I don't even really see it that way so much as this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I am moving somewhere with it. I'm going, in a direction that I like with my work.
And what would you say your style of writing would be? What would you say is the emphasis in your writing?
What do you mean by style, like genre?
Yeah, genre or just or the focus? Is it it's a genre, whether it's plot driven, whether it's more character driven, whether it's more drama driven?
I write fantasy. I
Mm.
honestly think that a lot of what I do is very character driven. I don't, I get into a lot of issues with myself because I realize that so much of what I like to write is not that heavy on action. It's a lot more focused on how people interact and what kind of flaws they have and have to address. I had this whole list in one of the threads in WSS, kind of things I talk about in my stories. Things like
Mm.
religion and how that would work on a different world, the different levels of extremism, how far is okay to go in order to keep the peace, stuff like that. So it's, to me, I write pretty complex stuff. I just prefer to be able to talk about these things in a world that is not filled with the mundane. The fantasy is kind of there, but I hate to say it's a backdrop because it's not quite. But it's more about dealing with bigger issues that happen to be in a fantasy setting, I guess. Without saying that I'm trying to communicate or preach to anybody by writing. That's not really what I'm
More.
into.
Is it a bit? It's like the big issues and almost done through allegory.
No, no, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to preach at anybody or trying to get some message across. I just happen to be working on these worlds, and I'm like, well, if this was like if these people do have these thoughts or do have these political views, social views, it's not just going to be a one group of people with only one set of views. There are varying levels of extremism, and if I know that there are varying levels of extremism, then how do those people interact? Basically, stuff like that.
Oh, almost like a thought experiment.
I don't know about that.
Hmm. But definitely the idea that you're seeing some sort of there's a sense of there being a big issue, and you're showing the almost a sense of resolution by putting it in a different plane, in a different atmosphere.
No, not really.
Hmm.
It's just, to me, it's world building and character building, and the more that I mull over it and the more that I write out my thoughts on it, the more, I guess, the more complex it gets, and the more things I keep adding to it that make sense to me and discarding that don't make sense to me.
Ah, so okay, with world building. So it's saying that like you're putting together almost a very, very detailed, complex world or a place where things happen.
Kinda, yeah. I'll just start with a story idea, and then I'll start to develop the people and the places involved, and then things kind of go from there, and the structure that they live in and operate in becomes more detailed.
Hmm. Okay, I can see a lot of parallels here. I remember Alicia when she was doing her interview. She also likes world building.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was a very interesting parallel between them, both in the sense of actually building this sort of in an imaginary area, but
Hmm.
nevertheless putting details into that imaginary area, and necessarily
Yeah,
building up the different details with people.
that's one thing that I particularly adored about Tolkien, because you have the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but then in the back you get all the fun stuff that wasn't explicitly mentioned in the books, and you get to find out what happens to everyone at the very end and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed it. I also read the Silmarillion, also read the Book of Lost Tales, and that was just, I guess, kind of more stuff.
Mhm. Okay. How are you with sorry what are your hobbies and interests outside of psychology and writing?
I was going to say, obviously, writing.
Yeah, obviously writing.
Yeah, I like listening to music. I
Mhm.
have a fairly extensive collection of music from video games. There's a site, Overclocked Remix, that does them for free and offers them, and I downloaded their archive once and have gone through most of them. Still have a number that I need to actually go through and evaluate. But I have those that I can listen to. I mostly listen to those. I had a rather interesting time with Joshua Berg, also known as Wolf Wolfle on other forums, where we were on Tiny Chat and he'd just been spending so much time doing stuff. He was like, oh my god, I can't relax. And it just so happened that I had actually compiled for myself a kind of sleep list of all of the more, I guess, pleasant-sounding, softer tunes that I had. I just kind of started a playlist for him, and he was like, oh my god, how are you doing this? And it was the funniest thing ever.
So you just kind of you knew what the right sensory input was needed.
Pretty much, at least for myself.
See. Okay, how are you with family? Now you've already mentioned difficulties with your father.
Most of my family. It really depends on the person. I mean, like, as I've said, my little sister's the only one that I really get along with really well. And she's someone that I've actually never fought with, and, you know, I'm 27 and she's 18, so that's saying something. Everyone else, yeah, it's kind of a free-for-all.
A free-for-all, so is it more a question of there just being almost hostility towards each other, hostility towards each other being a normal thing in that household, or is it more that it's actually destructive?
I don't know if I would call it long-standing hostility toward each other. In some cases, yes. In my case, particularly. But I think, to me, it's always been more that all of us are very opinionated, we're all very outspoken, and none of us are willing to shut up and just let the argument go away. And so there is a ton of conflict.
I can see also in my family is like there are certain types that are very, very opinionated and very, very forceful opinions, and they tend to collect in the middle of the family and have all their fights. And then there's some of the more peaceful ones on the edges who kind of try and smooth it over, but end up just getting sidelined.
Unfortunately, there are no peaceful ones in our family. We all get in there.
Wow.
I find that one of the problems that we tend to have is that, like, for example, my father. And by the way, I'm kind of distracted by the Tinky Winky up there. Oh, I think that's Tinky Winky.
That is a Tinky Winky. Simon got very distracted by Tinky Winky. I'm very unaware of what is in my room. If people ask me what I probably know. I like I like this wallpaper. I like the sky pattern of it, but I had no say in it. No, my mum painted it, which I think is available. I like sky. I think it suits someone who's trying to fall asleep. Or then again, I only sleep on my front rather than my back, so I don't think it actually works. But
you said she painted that?
Oh, she paints. She's an artist.
Wow, that is impressive and a lot of work.
Oh, she specializes in trompe-l'oeil, so I guess clouds are something that she's pretty good at.
That's cool. My mother's not like artist, but she had to do all these pretty effect things with our house and all this kind of stuff. What were we talking about? I remember the Tinky Winky.
Oh, can you see it still?
No, I can't see it. I'm just trying to remember what I was talking about. Authority in my family. Things like my stepfather is... My stepfather is very, very attached to the idea of authority, particularly what he feels is his God-given authority. And that causes a lot of clashes in the house because to him, this external being has given him authority, and therefore we are supposed to submit to him. Whereas I am very much the kind of person who is like, no, I don't. I demand the freedom, basically, to evaluate things on my terms and to make my own decisions and to question and not keep my mouth shut and go along just because someone in authority says so. And so he and I get into a lot of arguments, especially because his idea of authority can be extremely warped. Things like when he and we are arguing and he won't shut up and he thinks that drilling it into our head is the only way for us to actually understand. We're not supposed to tell him we've had enough. We're not supposed to walk away, stuff like that, because that's disrespecting his authority. And that's where I say bullshit. There are certain boundaries that you should respect as basically as a person and as us being people.
Mm-hmm.
As for my brother and I, he also, as much as I say that I have authority issues, and I do, my little brother also has authority issues and is often known for not really giving a fuck if it's something that he doesn't want to do. And as someone who was in charge of him quite a bit, I'm 11 years older than he is, that has caused a ton of problems over the years. My little sister, on the other hand, part of why we get along so well is that she's always been pretty obedient and responsible. I didn't have to worry about her going off and doing stupid stuff and what have you. And that was kind of one part of other ways in which we just happened to get along.
So there seems to be a sense where although you're good at pushing back and resisting authority, it's because you're specifically resisting a sort of enforced law that's been put upon you, rather than accept the law as it happens to be. You kind of have to evaluate it in terms of your own conscience.
Yeah,
and then if it
I
doesn't
don't even know about considering it a conscience, because it's not always an ethical thing for me. It is just as much about, does this action or does this view actually make sense to me based on my own experience, based on my own reasoning.
So, what would be an example of what just wouldn't make sense to you?
Oh, like the conflict that I mentioned some time back that I had with my stepfather, where I was talking to him about why there was this particular friend of mine that I decided I didn't want to date. And it was kind of a mixture of things, lack of physical attraction, some of the things he said about discipline. I have nothing against corporal punishment by any means, but the way in which he went about saying things, it just really concerned me because, I've been physically abused. And that just sounded a little too much like that to me. And I know that were I to ever end up with someone like that, it would go very, very poorly. There was also the fact that he drank alcohol. And I have nothing against people who drink alcohol. I don't think it's a bad thing in moderation. But for myself, I had decided that I didn't want to drink any because I know myself. I know that I have issues with anxiety. I have issues with depression. I know that if I really like something, I have a tendency to overdo it. And as a result, alcohol is not something I wanted to start. So being with someone who kept it around is not really something I would prefer to do. So my stepmother agreed with this and then mentioned this study that he had come across that said that people who drank socially were more likely to become alcoholics. And I said, well, wait a minute. I think that would depend on context. Because I don't see why someone who goes out and drinks moderately with people would be just as likely to get addicted to the stuff as someone who goes out to get basically shit-faced every time they hang out.
Yes.
And he was having none of it. He was like, this is what the results say. And I was like, well, I think there's more to it than you think there is. And he eventually accused me of completely discounting the facts and what other experts have said because of my own reasoning. And I eventually got him to shut up for a little bit. Kind of a well-placed barb.
A well-placed what?
Barb.
A barb.
I told him that this was precisely the reason that he pissed Mom off so much, which is true. It's because he doesn't shut up.
Ah.
They've had very, very long-term relationship problems. So I did shut him up for a little bit, and then he kept trying to talk again. I just kind of ignored him, and he eventually stopped talking, and we moved on to something else. But that would be an example of me rejecting a conclusion because it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Exactly. There's I feel that I find it interesting how immediately once the conclusion makes sense and you felt it was being put upon you and you didn't want it to, you knew exactly how to resist it. You knew exactly how to get at his weak point and dig the nail right in there.
Well, I've grown up with him, so yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. How you, oh yes, what are you good at in life?
Apparently, I'm very good with language. I really, really enjoyed my linguistics class that I took. That was tons of fun. When I take those random tests on the internet on different kinds of intelligence, linguistic is usually the top one. Obviously, I read well. My reading comprehension is apparently pretty decent. I scored well on the ACT in that. I am pretty intelligent. I'm particularly good at, like, the night before a test, all I really have to do is kind of re-skim over things, and I'll have it fresh in my brain for later. I can be very good in essays. Like, I hate doing essays, but once I kind of get into the groove of it, I can start to notice connections between various things in the work and pull them together on the page. I also have a tendency to do this in class. Things like we may be talking about one thing and maybe something else from another class is relevant. And I can bring up, oh, hey, you know, this is another example that we spoke about recently. Let's see. Apparently I do well enough at being cheerful and patient at my job. I'm actually kind of astounded at how well I do at being nice on the job, considering, you know, how I can go off on people other places. But I honestly, for the longest time, I felt that my abilities and talents weren't really that useful because I didn't have anything particularly tangible. I'm not domestic, you know, not... And it was since starting at this job that I realized that having people skills and being able to be that kind of person to customers is extremely valuable. And, like, I've had people compliment me on being so patient. I've had people compliment me on being helpful, on doing my job well, because, you know, because I sit there and explain things to them if I think they don't, you know, if they're communicating that they don't understand something. And I'm willing to spend, you know, 5+ minutes with someone helping them to understand the menu if that's what they need. I recently got a compliment from someone. It was kind of funny. I have been working nights, closing most of the summer, and I was working days before. And I worked, I guess it was Sunday morning, and a number of the regulars were like, hey, it's cool to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while. And one of them was, he's not an expressive person, but it was clear that he was particularly happy to see me back because he said, you know, that I was something about my cheerful smile and the fact that I was somebody who actually knew him. Because, you know, there are so many, our job has such a high turnover rate that people come and go so much of the time. And he just, you know, I guess appreciated there being someone that he had some kind of connection with in some way or another. So yeah, I usually get compliments from my managers as well. As much as they do have to cater to my physical issues, a couple of them still try to make sure that I know that I'm doing a good job and that I'm doing appreciated, and you know, I really like that.
You almost like you like being told your work effort value, like being
Yeah.
told that you've put that the effort that you've put into it has led to good results. And also I noticed that when you first you also mentioned to begin with, like what you certain tests and scores are told about you and
Mhm.
what you could show as clear evidence that you were good at this particular thing.
Mhm.
Okay, I also noticed that exactly you, although you're someone who may have pissed people off in the past in different areas, you seem to be very good at making this connection with people in the workplace, at least. You're able to establish a rapport with people.
I guess it's not something that I consciously do. I just strive to be polite with people and, you know, help them get what they need, basically. And over time, with them coming in over and over, we kind of get used to seeing each other. And, you know, it's like, oh, hey, that person is coming in. Cool.
Ah, so then you remember them from the next time, and so you then,
Mhm.
again, you know how to treat them because of based on how you treated them last time. And
It's not even really that. I mean, there are people who come in and get the same thing every time, and it's, you know, I do end up memorizing orders after a while. But I mean, it's not like I go out of my way to treat a certain person a certain way. It's
yeah.
just kind of being generally pleasant to them.
Hmm. Oh, I see. So in other words, just being pleasant in general in that
Hmm.
particular situation.
Yeah, that is also something of note. I am extremely different at work than I am at home. I get to work generally on time. I haven't done as well at it recently, and I need to kind of step it up again. You know, I do try to get my work done. To me, having a job is necessary. I mean, if I want to be able to eat and have my medicine, if I want a job, you know, if I want a roof over my head, I need to be able to hold down a job. And so that's precisely what I do. And I don't tend to have a lot of patience or sympathy for people who don't do that. Like people who say, well, I have authority issues. I'm like, well, yes, so do I, and I can pull it together long enough to get an income. Why can't you?
Yes, there's a sense of that even if you may have problems, you still show a need to actually problem solve and find a way to actually overcome those problems.
I guess for me, the consequences of not adapting are not worth not adapting, basically.
Yes.
I may not like working, but it's still necessary, so I'm going to do it.
Mm. Okay. Where was I? Oh yes. What are you bad at in life?
Um, let's see. Obviously, I'm not so great at organization. Like, I'm one of those people. Let me look. Let me see how many folders I have on my desktop right now. I have a shitload of folders. I have all of my, except for the ones sitting on my desktop, I have all of my stories sorted into the appropriate folders. I have various versions of different stories sorted into different relevant folders. Let's see, I have a folder of recipes, I have a folder of manga. I mean, I can be stupidly organized when I want to be.
Mm.
But on a larger scale, I'm very, very messy because I generally just don't care. It's
Mm.
not something that I see as what I want to spend my time on when I could be doing something that's actually fun and interesting.
Mm.
So that's one of my faults. I procrastinate horribly, which is also related to the whole "this isn't fun, why do I have to do it" thing. And that really bit me in the ass in college, especially once I moved into English,
Mm.
because reading is not optional there. You cannot, especially if you're reading a lot of novels, you can't just kind of coast and then go back and skim and be able to produce something of value. Excuse me. You have to actually apply yourself.
Mm.
And it took me a long time to really, hold on, to really get my act together and do that. And hold on, I'm going to eat a cookie piece.
Ooh.
Mm.
That tastes nice?
Mm-hmm. It
Mm.
is chocolate cookie. It
Yeah.
has chunks of milk chocolate and white chocolate. It has walnuts in it.
I like
It is
walnuts.
my favorite cookie.
Mm.
Funny story, actually. It took me forever to try this cookie because it has nuts in it, and I hate nuts.
Oh.
And I finally got
Oh.
around to trying it, and now it's my favorite.
Hmm. What about the taste did you enjoy?
It's very chocolatey.
Oh, I see. So it's almost like if despite the walnuts you enjoy it because of the chocolate.
I can't really taste the walnuts.
Oh, okay, okay. So in other words, it has walnuts in it, but you have no idea that it doesn't taste like there's walnuts in it, and therefore it's okay.
Precisely.
Hmm. That makes sense.
Let's see, what were we talking about before I started eating?
What were you bad
What
at?
was I bad at? Right. I get distracted easily.
You distracted easily? Right.
um, I'm really, I guess that's not really being bad at something so much as a bad habit.
Hmm.
I'm not particularly good at just dropping an offense and moving on. Once someone pisses me off, I generally retain that negative feeling toward them, particularly if they did something that really pissed me off. I have a tendency to stew on my emotions and not really, hold on, sorry.
Is it very hot over there?
Huh? It is a
Is it
little
very hot over
warm, but
there?
also just like the phlegm in my throat after eating that cookie.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
Anyway, trying to remember precisely what I was saying. I was talking about,
You're
just
actually talking.
regulating my emotions is kind of difficult. And granted, I think that's another thing that can be largely blamed on my upbringing.
Hmm.
Because, my mother being such an angry and explosive person and just having my views invalidated and having people blow up at me, just haven't learned to express myself very well, for one thing.
Hmm.
But also, we were always taught things like you can't get angry and this is bad and that is bad according to the Bible. And somewhere along the line, I internalized that having these feelings is a bad thing.
Oh.
And it was only, I guess, somewhat recently, because I was in therapy for a while, that I finally began to realize that, one, emotions are what they are. I'm not a bad person because I feel something. It's more about what I do with it. But I also realized that there is absolutely no reason to beat myself up over the fact that I am 27 and still having to learn this, because it makes a lot of sense based on how I was raised.
Yes.
It's not my fault. It's more, what happened around me. And it's a minor tangent, but that's kind of something that I tend to think about. Like, I like being able to connect what has happened in the past with who I am now, and I don't do it as a way of excusing my behavior. I just think it's nice to be able to find the explanation for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, in other words, you're you see, you're able to see yourself as something that has developed over time, has changed over time, and you know that the events in the past have partially contributed to who you are now.
Yeah, I don't really see it as the first part, like I've changed over time, just like what you said, the second part, that something that has happened has contributed to me being the way I am. And I like finding those causes and being able to connect them like that.
Mm. So my dad just kind of threw the phone on me and turned off the light.
Oh.
He's very much about control of electricity, so I suppose.
Ah, okay.
Indeed. Okay, yeah. So another word. Okay, I kind of got distracted with his throwing the phone at me. I'm sorry.
We're talking about things I'm bad at, and I was talking about emotional regulation.
Yes, and the idea of the idea of explaining your present state based on
Right.
your past states.
That was
Yes,
a tangent.
yes. Although it's a very revealing tangent. That's the thing. I like tangents because they reveal things.
Hmm.
Mm.
There are probably other things I'm bad at. I'm horrible at mental math.
Mhm.
Like, I have an interest in numbers, which is ridiculously obvious from all the jottings in my notebook,
Mhm.
trying to do things like figure out relative ages and compute this and that and what have you, but as far as actually figuring things out in my head, I'm god awful at it.
Mhm.
Let's see. I'm trying to think. I would think that I'd be better at this because I've had long laundry lists of things I can't do before, and it's not really coming to mind.
Mm.
I think also I have a tendency to, when I get irritated, I have a tendency to lash out at people
Mm.
without really considering whether what I'm doing is constructive. Like, maybe the whole point was to kind of, I think the word is castigate that person, just kind of go at them and berate
Punish.
them. Precisely, yeah. Um, and in that sense, I've been pretty effective at what I meant to do,
Mm.
but at the same time, it doesn't lead to that constructive of a solution.
Mhm.
And that is something that I try to watch out for from time to time.
You do. Oh, do you often have that case where you get that emotional in that immediate emotional response, but you don't necessarily express that emotional response immediately, and you take into account your relationship with that person before you express it.
Probably. I have a tendency to be undercritical of people that I'm close to because I do value their opinion more and I value the relationship more, and that can cause me to be way too shy
Mm.
about saying what I feel and what I think because I'm afraid of offending them and I'm afraid of them disapproving, and I don't know, I have very, very strong rejection issues, and
Mm.
so that can make me very hesitant to confront people.
I see. So there's a mixture. So there's that
Mhm.
sense that you have trouble stopping yourself from castigating people, but also that tendency that when you're actually close to someone and you actually have a certain proper relationship with that person, you may not then act in a way that might harm that relationship.
Basically, yeah.
Hmm. But it's interesting though that you say that as almost a negative.
Yes, because there is considering the relationship, and then there's never speaking your mind because you're too afraid to.
True.
And I tend to veer into the latter category.
Hmm. I see. Right. What brings admiration and criticism from others?
Well, obviously I do my job well. I mentioned that
Yeah.
before.
Yep.
I also draw from time to time. I get some praise for that, particularly my little brother who thinks I'm amazing and don't entirely get it, but okay.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. I've gotten fair amount of, I guess, validation appreciation over my intelligence. Something going after you there?
There's a fly on the screen.
Ew.
You know, it just buzzes onto the screen right in front of you, and you don't quite know how to deal with it. It's running out of energy, so it tends to sit now. It's a rather lethargic.
Ah.
So they're more annoying.
Have you heard the joke about Beelzebub?
Beelzebub. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be almost like a pun on a pun, seeing as Beelzebub already means Lord of the Flies.
It is supposed to be Satan in the form of a mosquito in your room at 3 a.m. But I think it applies to fly here too.
Yeah, I think it would account. I mean, this is clearly a day fly, but it's been trapped in
Mm-hmm.
my room all day, so it's now a bit. I think it's a bit tired out.
Let me out.
Yeah.
Probably attracted to the light.
Mm.
Anyway,
That's
what
what I'm
was
gonna
saying?
do. After the interview, I'll open the windows and it can fly
Mm-hmm.
out when it's lighter. Where were we? Where were we? Okay. Oh yeah. What bring? Okay. Let's. Oh,
Right,
I know what I want to
admiration
do.
and criticism.
Yes. Is there anything else to cover there?
Obviously, I get criticized by some people for. Some people think I'm overly hostile, and I don't always necessarily agree with them. Some people think I'm overly closed-minded, and I might agree with them to some degree. Let's see. Jeez. I'm trying to think of what else I've been criticized for. I'm not so much that I've drawn criticism about this, but I tend to be fairly slow. Not like mentally, but just physically. I do things at my own pace, and that pace is not very fast,
Mm-hmm.
which is not really the best when you work at a cafe. I guess I'm more of a kind of slow and detail-oriented person.
Ah, okay. So you don't like kind of rush into things and take things on very quickly. You tend to go at a more stable pace.
Depends on what I'm rushing into.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, I like to tease my manager at work. He's the one who I think is ESE.
Mm.
Because he just like moves everywhere all the time and he leaves messes and stuff, and like whenever he
Mm.
comes in and tries to enter the password on the register, he has to do it like 2 or 3 times because he's going so fast that he keeps getting it wrong, and I'm like, slow down. And he says, I only have
Yeah.
one speed, and I'm just like,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, I got a lot of criticism from my mother
Mm.
for being too lazy, and yeah, she kind of had a point. I wasn't very helpful around the house, didn't keep my room clean. Let's see, I'm sure there was other criticism there if I can remember it. This isn't precisely criticism, I suppose, but like she would tell a joke and I just kind of quietly snort or whatever. And then she'd be like, oh, well, I found it funny.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't give her a big enough reaction or something.
Yeah. So you don't actually, for you, you don't automatically express the emotion which is expected of you.
I can. I do it more often than I'd like.
Mm.
It's kind of a long story, and I don't want to completely go into it. But I ended up having a relationship that went extremely sour.
Mm.
And as a result, that's a lot of why I started being as agreeable to people as I tried to be, and kind of trying to express the appropriate expression at the appropriate moment, stuff like that. And at some point, I had to evaluate. I had to acknowledge the fact that I had done this for so long that I had not really. I was no longer so in touch with what I actually felt, and
Hmm.
that kind of sucked. But it's good for work.
Hmm. It does. It does sound very good for work, certainly,
Yeah.
and I think it certainly allows you to keep people pleased. I guess in America, I guess keeping the customers pleased is very important.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, you be nice to the customer and then you bitch about them later.
later, yes. Mm. Right. Question 6. This is one I've been looking forward to asking you, actually. Describe your ideal place, setting, or world. Describe its atmosphere and surroundings, its inhabitants, the conversations or lack thereof, and the philosophy of its ideal environment. And that flies edging towards my toe. Oh, it's on my toe. It's on my toe. It's on my toe. It's not even flying away. It can't be bothered
It's
to
going to
fly.
bite your toe.
It's like completely. It's just can't be bothered to fly away from danger now. Um,
It's probably following the light of the laptop.
Oh my god! It flew back to. It's now gone back to the. It's gone back to the screen. He's going back. Okay, yes, yeah. So that question.
I don't know, that sounds like a very long and complicated and involved sort of answer.
I just want you to world build for me.
I know, and that's long and complicated and involved. I mean, it's not like I just do this sort of thing, you know. I mean,
Don't you like have a pre-made one, like a drawer in your mind, and just take it out and just.
not really. I mean, if I were to describe my ideal place in this world, it would be
Okay.
somewhere relaxing. It would be somewhere where, you know, I could just kind of be me and do what I preferred and be accepted for it. Um, I don't know, if I'm visualizing, I've always kind of liked this idea of just like being in this garden with the gazebo in the middle, and it's, you know, relaxing, and obviously there's nothing like pests or actually having to tend the garden because that wouldn't make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my most obvious thing.
Hmm. Okay, so in other words, just something where you can be more relaxed, more comfortable with yourself.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. And what sort of conversations do you enjoy with other people?
Well, obviously I enjoy bitching quite a bit, as you
Mm.
can attest to.
As we can
Many
certainly.
other friends of mine can attest to. Um, Also, just, I don't know, I talk with Jesse and Olivia, and you too, a lot about Socionics. Jesse and I particularly have a lot of long conversations about just kind of comparing R and P and how they are, what they are, and how they interrelate, and it's always a lot of fun talking with him about that because I feel like he's someone who really knows what he's talking about.
Hmm.
To use one of the kinds of conversations. I enjoy discussing personality theory generally, whatever personality theory we're talking about. He and I also talk about astrology quite a bit, and that's fun. Let's see. I'm trying to think. One of my coworkers and I were recently talking about, like, people who are empaths and stuff like that, being able to feel emotions, being able to feel energy. I like being able to not just talk with people who experience those kinds of things, because I have something kind of similar, but also being connected with people who are like that, because, you know, this is something that we have in common and something that we can understand about each other that not everyone is going to be able to comprehend or grasp.
Mm. The empath thing interested me actually. So, what about you would you say is particularly empathic? How's it
Well,
work?
I've actually, a couple of people have had to convince me that I am empathic because thank God I do not pick up emotions off of people. That just sounds like way too much. Ugh, I have enough fun already. What happens is that I am actually fairly sensitive to energy. One of the things that I seem to notice in particular is, like, I don't notice when the atmosphere around me is stressful, but I really notice when that stress in the atmosphere goes away.
Mm.
Like walking through Walmart at 5 o'clock in the evening versus walking through there at 6 in the morning and it's clear and it's peaceful and it's like, yes. Or walking through my house when my family is gone and the atmosphere, it's just like I can't even really describe it. And there's just this feeling that what is around me is completely different.
Hmm.
And it's way calmer than usual.
You do seem very, very receptive to your physical surroundings and how calm and harmonic they are.
To some degree, yes. I notice things like, for example, I can think of the loft at the old community college that I went to, and it was painted this kind of deepish, grayish blue. And I always remember that it was incredibly relaxing being there. And I think it took me a while to really be able to connect it to the fact that, oh, it's the paint on the wall, and that's relaxing me. But I knew that feeling, and like with a lot of the music that I listen to, I know which ones are relaxing if I want to go for that, or if I am feeling particularly emo or melancholy, I know what music to reach for to evoke that particular feeling. Or if I want something really driving, which is a lot of fun, I know what to go for that.
Yes, exactly. You automatically know that that's something that's very, very, a very, very strong part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Hilariously, though. Oh,
Yeah.
and speaking of sensory things, the bear.
Oh, plushie.
Yes, it is very, very soft, plushy, and I love it. But I don't really have the motivation to do so, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, there's good 5 plus fuzzy blankets in this room.
Wow.
Because I collect them. I'm sitting with a particularly soft one on my lap right now. This is the one I sleep with. It's actually really, really weird because I've gotten to where, like, if I go to bed at night and it's not there, I need it, and I need to go get it because it's what I sleep with.
No, I used to be like that too until it's like got taken away, and then one day I just didn't notice it taken away. Yeah, I used to have all these toys. I had like lots of them, and if anyone were taken away, I'd wonder where they were. 'Cause I used to look for them every single night, make sure they're all there. And they're taken away to make it rather distressed, and I was younger. But eventually one day, they got taken away. I just didn't notice. I had no idea that they'd been taken away. And I was thinking to myself, where have my toys gone? Right. Okay. Describe a bad.
Sorry, I should add really quickly though. As much as I say all that, I am absolute shit at taking care of myself. That is another thing I am bad at.
Okay, could you explain more on that?
Yes. It took me years upon years to be able to reliably notice when my blood sugar dropped. And even now, there are times when I don't catch it if it's not the normal sensation that I'm used to. Like when it's blatant, I can tell you there are times when I can pinpoint when it's dropped or when it's crashed.
Yeah.
Other times it's just a general sick feeling. It's like, oh great, what's wrong with me now? Is it this ailment? Is it that ailment? Is it that one? And then finally it's like, I might eat and I'm like, oh, blood sugar. Yeah, right.
Oh, okay. So you're not so good at diagnosing what's wrong with you.
I guess. Also things like I'm not particularly good at actually going and eating when I should. I'll be sitting here with, crashed blood sugar because I don't feel like putting out the effort to make the food. And what's really sad about that is sometimes I have easy make food in the fridge and I just forgot it was there.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, that's annoying. I've I can be incredibly lazy with food, and I kind of wait till because I'm used to everyone else making food instead, so I just kind of feed off them. I'm more of a scavenger.
Yeah, I remember those days, living in a 5-person household. You
Oh,
just
perfect.
go and eat, and my sister, I think it was my sister who didn't like we ate leftovers all the time, and I was like, why? It's, it's there. Why not?
Mm.
I'm sick of eating something eventually, but I tend to eat it till I get sick of it, which is kind of a problem.
Mm.
Because eventually I get sick of everything that I usually make, and then it's like, crap, what do I make now?
I do find though with your if it's a question of low blood sugar, would you say
Mhm.
that it's like a rather unusual situation to be in though?
No. Um, I mean, I have reactive hypoglycemia, so my
I
blood
don't
sugar
think
typically drops
yeah,
every
I mean,
couple of hours.
exactly. It seems to be like an unusual pressure for a person to be placed under.
Uh,
Um,
I see what you mean. It's kind of an abnormal physical condition, yeah.
yeah.
Um, and I'm not always the best at preparing for it, like taking the appropriate food. There are times I've gotten out of the house and suddenly it's like, shit, there goes my blood sugar, and I have nothing on me.
Oh, oh dear.
Or I'll have packed something and completely forgotten about it, and I don't discover it till much later.
Ah. I mean, and also that you seem to have not actually designed a methodology or process by which you can remind yourself.
Yeah. I was always the kind of person, like, people will tell me, put it in a planner so you remember it, and then I either forget to write it down or I forget to look in the planner. So it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Um, Describe a bad place, a situation where you feel hopeless, in fear, and insecure. What would be causing these insecurities?
That would be the home I grew up in. My parents were excessively controlling. My mother was over-emotional, incredibly irrational.
Mm.
That was a bad situation. She blew up all the time, blew up at Dad. We fought. We had yelling matches. That was interesting.
Mm.
A lot of childhood was spent having to walk on eggshells around her, and that is something that I have seen in my brother and sister, and I really hate that she affects them the way that she does when she does it. I don't, whatever issues I may have with my little brother, I don't think he deserves to have that done to him.
Mm.
And I had to reach a point where I said, you know what, my mother's issues are none of my concern, and I refuse to be, let's see, how did I put it? Basically, I refuse to adapt my emotions to her mood. I refuse to allow her to affect what I am feeling.
Yes.
If she's pissy, that's her problem, and I'm not going to bother myself over it.
Mm. So you set that relationship now between you and her where she cannot actually affect how you feel. You kind of pushed
It's
it away to a
not
certain distance.
it's not so much that she cannot affect how I feel as I choose to
Yes.
not try to affect her back in return. I refuse to do the necessary things to make her feel better just because she's in a snit again.
I see. But so, yes, exactly. So yeah, exactly the idea of you set that sort of relationship. So you're no longer someone who should be, based on that relation to her, have to look after her emotional state.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Um, Final question.
Okay.
What do you feel about the world we live in? What are your opinions, affirmations, and criticisms of the present day and the people in it?
I don't think about it a whole lot, really.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I have always been someone who is more concerned with what's in my immediate vicinity than what's going on in the world beyond me.
Hmm.
That, like, with my friends, the kind of people who are mine and that I care about, and larger issues are just that, larger issues.
Hmm.
I guess to give a somewhat recent example, I had never really thought, I mean, I'd thought a little bit about the healthcare stuff that's going on right now in the U.S., but I guess I was never really that strongly interested in the idea of widespread healthcare, what have you, But now, as someone who does have an autoimmune disease, someone who's having to deal with the fact that I have to get insurance and, I don't make a lot of money, things like that become a lot more relevant to me. And I'm beginning to realize why I live in a very, very Republican state. And this has blocked a lot of, I guess, what people would consider social progress, things like gay marriage, which I came to support after realizing that, if I do swing that way, it's kind of consistent to actually support that completely.
Yeah,
just a little. And I'm beginning to see why, as a state, we are considered to be completely backwards, and why people think that our governor is just god-awful and, needs to go away. So, in that sense, like I said, experiencing it personally tends to make me more concerned about it.
So, in other words, you're not so pushed by hypothetical situations. So your attitudes aren't affected by the hypotheticals so much as the actualities.
Probably, yeah. I used to, kind of going off of that, I used to constantly think about how things would play out in my head, how this conversation would go, what have you, and maybe even answer hypothetical questions. And somewhere along the line, it occurred to me that, my own thoughts for what are going to happen are very poor indicators of what are actually going to happen. Things like, I've gotten to where if someone asks me a hypothetical, I'm like, without being in that situation, I honestly couldn't tell you. Because I realized that I don't know. I don't always know how I feel about something until I actually experience it. And if I do have an opinion on something, being in the middle of it may very well change my opinion of it.
So you don't really rely on thinking of things they haven't actually experienced before. You may have tried before and you realise it didn't actually work out so well for you.
To a degree, yes. I mean, obviously there are still views that I've held that I was taught in my childhood, but in coming into other situations and getting around new people and what have you, I have moved away from those ideas.
Okay. Right, so those are all the questions. I'd just like to give just a quick summary of what we can see from your type from this interview. I think that's a very, very clear part of you is that you always seem to know how you feel, and you're very good at communicating specifically how you feel about things and your attitudes. And you tend to have rather strong attitudes, and you often convey them in this rather almost slightly sardonic manner, and slightly often with strong opinions. There's a sense that you also tend to if something happens which causes a very, very bad feeling in you, you'll tend to castigate the person who actually creates that bad feeling in you, and you're good at punishing. So that would be the most obvious part would be this introverted ethics in leading with extrovert sensation as a creative function. However, possibly even stronger than extrovert sensation would be this introverted sensation. You do have this awareness of comfortable things around you, awareness of the harmony of your physical surroundings, and keeping yourself comfortable in your physical surroundings. Although this is communicated less in your overall behavior than your actual personal attitudes and how people have affected those attitudes, and your volitional actions against people who have affected those attitudes in a bad way. Then there's also the sense that you have a good mobilizing introverted intuition. The fact that you've tried to find a way of explaining how you've turned out the way you are now from looking at past events leading through towards here and now can very much be explained by an introverted intuition as a mobilizing function. You also seem to be someone who is certainly rather reliant on extroverted logic, in that you when you describe what you're good at in life, you did use almost actual test scores and actual evidence to support what made you this way and that way, as if you'd relied on these certain sources to tell you this and that. However, at the same time, you're someone who won't allow things to be forced down upon you without it making sense to you personally, and that shows a good amount of introverted logic. You have the ability to actually make sense of things yourself, which make good as a role function. So yeah, overall I'd say that ethical sensory introvert makes complete sense. Yeah, so that's my analysis, and those are all the questions. So it's bye from me.
Okay.
And it's bye from you.
And
Bye
you
bye.
can let the fly out now.
Yeah, I can get the fly out. I need to open the window and let.
And it won't eat your toe anymore.
Exactly. Oh, it's been driving me mad. And it's so hot in here as well. I'm so sweaty and dehydrated. I need to get some more water. Oh, okay. See you soon.
Bye bye.